You're listening to the Quint podcast.
Exams have become a source of anxiety, stress, and confusion for final year students in India. Weeks after hashtag Students' Lives Matter trended on Twitter, over 30 students from across the country, including a COVID-positive student, moved the Supreme Court against the guidelines by the UGC or the University Grants Commission under the Ministry of Human Resource Development that mandated the conducting of the final semester of final year examinations by 30th September. How do we conduct exams without risking exposure? How do we wrap up the academic year without exams when educational institutions have been shut for 5 months? The pandemic has presented these challenges before academic institutions, students, their parents, and teachers. Initially, several states had decided to cancel the final exams in light of the pandemic, but the UGC guidelines from 7th July that directed an offline-online hybrid mode of exams for final years may force colleges to revisit that decision. But is it a sound decision to make at such a time when students' careers are hanging by a thread? Could there have been an alternative solution to this? In this podcast, we'll hear from some of the student petitioners talk about the several hurdles that they are facing with this decision. Advocate Anubha Sahai from India White Parents Association, who's been helping students challenge the guidelines, and Assistant Professor of English at Qazi Nazrul University, Debaditya Bhattacharya. You're listening to The Big Story, the podcast where we dissect the headline-making news for you. And I'm your host, Shorbori. First, let's understand what exactly the UGC guidelines say about the final year exams. Number 1, hold exams either online, offline, or through a combination of both, but by September 30th. Number 2, those final year students who have a backlog should compulsorily be evaluated by conducting examinations in offline, online, or a blended mode as per the feasibility and suitability. Number 3, in case a student is unable to write final year exams, they can appear for a special examination at a different point as and when feasible. These are the main directives, but for a lot of students, this translates into choosing between risking exposure for offline exams and finding a digital solution for online exams. But what if neither of those are viable options for some? This student from Assam who wished to remain anonymous expresses his problems with the online mode.
मैम मेरा जो मैम प्रोजेक्ट है मैम है फाइनल ईयर का मैम मैं जो मेरे प्रोफेसर है मैम मैं उनके टच में मैम 5 मंथ से सिंस 5 मंथ मैम उनके टच में मैम नहीं हूँ, ठीक है। तो मैम और मेरा लैपटॉप भी मैम पूरी तरीके से खराब है और मेरा मैम अभी वो भी मैम ऑनलाइन प्रोसेसिंग
I haven't been able to attend classes properly for the last 5 months. The classes have been getting disrupted. My laptop is also not working, and these problems are presenting as hurdles in the online mode. I don't think it's feasible for us to prepare for exams in a month's time now. It's impossible. We have asked the university authorities. They said that the exams can be wrapped up between 12 to 30 September, but the evaluation process is so slow generally that we are expecting the results only by December. That means I won't be able to apply for a PhD on time as planned. I might have to waste a year.
मैम इतना ये प्रोसेस मैम इतना स्लो है मैम, यहाँ में जो यूनिवर्सिटी एग्जाम कंडक्ट करवाता है मैम इतना स्लो है कि मैम हम लोगों को रिजल्ट मिलते मैम शायद दिसंबर या अगले साल तक हम लोगों को रुकना पड़ेगा। तो हम मैम मुझे मेरा मैम पीएचडी या कुछ मैं अप्लाई मैम सोच रहा था कि मैं अप्लाई कर दूं मैम, लेकिन इस वजह से मैम शायद मेरा ईयर लॉस हो सकता है और मैम हायर स्टडी के लिए मैं जा नहीं पाऊंगा मैम। यस एब्सोल्युटली मैम।
Another student from Odisha who also wished to remain anonymous talks about how in her college, students who appeared for the online mode complained of several technological problems.
बहुत सारा प्रोटेस्ट किए वो लोग, बहुत सारा रिक्वेस्ट भी किए, उससे बहुत कुछ किए, फिर भी ये लोग उनका कुछ भी नहीं सुन रहे, सिर्फ बोल रहे हैं कि नहीं तुमको एग्जाम कराना पड़ेगा ही पड़ेगा बस। बट मैम बहुत सारे स्टूडेंट्स आई हैव प्रूफ आल्सो।
We held protests and also tried to request with our university, but they aren't budging. They say exams have to be held at any cost. And I have proof of it, that some students say that they did appear for online exams, but their computers crashed and their tests didn't get registered. But the college authorities retorted by saying that they can't provide a laptop to all students. One department in our college switched off their phones entirely. Nobody is helping.
और भी तो बच्चे हम क्या सबको लैपटॉप प्रोवाइड करते रहेंगे? तो ऐसे वो कोई हेल्प नहीं कर रहा है. एक ने तो एक डिपार्टमेंट तो फोन स्विच ऑफ ही करके रख दिया. तो
Now, Odisha was one of those handful states, along with Rajasthan, Punjab, Maharashtra, West Bengal, and some others, which had initially cancelled the final year examinations earlier in June. But the UGC decision may reverse it all. Out of these states, Maharashtra is the only one so far that took a stand in the court against this coercive decision, instructing universities that holding final year examinations by September end were not binding on the state or the universities in the state. But a lot of other states like Odisha are still undecided about the next steps. So in what kind of a mental space does this leave students in? Moreover, with the rising infections, what about those students with comorbidities who also don't have access to the internet? Listen to the student from Odisha describe her distress with this situation.
तो हमारा क्या हुआ था ना, ओडिशा में कैंसिल हो गया था ऑलरेडी, गवर्नमेंट ने कैंसिल कर दिए थे. तो फिर हम क्या किए ना, हम अपना एमकॉम, मैं तो बीकॉम का हूँ ना, तो नेक्स्ट हमको एमकॉम.
After the Odisha government had cancelled the exams initially, I returned my BCom books to the person I had borrowed it from. Then I got MCom books and started preparing for that. And now this guideline has come a month later and it's left me utterly confused. Some are saying exams will happen, some are saying that it won't. And we don't know if things will be better by September. The infections in Odisha has also increased. There are so many cases where I live and I'm an asthmatic patient and it's not feasible for me to step out.
तो पूरा बदतर से बदतर होता जा रहा है. हमारे यहाँ भी लोकल केस, हमारे घर के पास भी. और मैं मैम सच बोल रही हूँ, मैं एक आस्थमा पेशेंट हूँ और मेरे लिए एग्जाम से मैंने कुछ हो गया तो मैं तो रिकवर नहीं कर पाऊंगी ना, क्योंकि मैं आस्थमा पेशेंट हूँ ना मैम.
On the same day as the UGC guidelines got out, the Union Ministry of Home Affairs also allowed universities and other institutions to conduct compulsory final year examinations. The UGC had also said that around 195 universities across India have already conducted online or offline exams for final year students, while around 366 others are planning to conduct examinations in online, offline or a hybrid mode. But these students you've just heard, along with several others, are challenging this very decision in court. And advocate Anubha Sahai, who's been helping these students, say that this one-size-fits-all decision doesn't give equal and fair opportunity to everyone, and that's why it's not in line with the fundamental rights of citizens. She lays out the problems with this decision and why exactly it needs to be reversed.
So there are many reasons why offline exams cannot be conducted, because number of cases are rising daily, and also the COVID has been declared as airborne recently. So now there is a lot of stress among students that how they will cope up, how they will go and conduct exams, appear for exams. The problem which they are facing, the major problem which they are facing is with regard to transport, and also stay and accommodation. Transport we know is not available. All the central trains have been suspended by railways, and even local public transport is not available. So the students are facing a lot of problem. They won't be able to commute if they have to appear for exam. Many students have left for their hometown from their respective universities and colleges where they are staying. So they'll have to again go back to those colleges to appear for exam. They have to appear for the exam in those particular centers. It will be practically impossible for students to appear for offline, those who have already relocated, and even those who have not relocated. Even if they are staying in that particular city, then also most of the cities in our country are now in containment zone. So students who are in containment zone, it will be practically impossible for them to appear for exam, because as per MHA guidelines, no examination or no schools can function in containment zone. As far as online exams are concerned, online infrastructure and availability in poor and rural parts of country, and in fact even in urban also, like which has happened recently in case of DU. The mock test totally failed. So as far as online infrastructure is concerned, we don't have sufficient infrastructure in villages. Not only villages, in urban areas also students are facing problem. As far as other issues are concerned, why we are opposing is that the students will have to go through the quarantine guidelines which are prescribed by the particular state. They'll have to go for quarantine for 14 days to even 21 days in some states. The guidelines are that you have to be in quarantine if you're coming from some other city or some other state. So those students who will be traveling from containment zone to even non-containment zone, or from containment to non-containment zone, they will have to go through this quarantine process of 14 days or 15 days or even 21 days in advance. So how they will be preparing, how they are going to even take a call whether to apply for the exam or not, because they have to prepare everything 1 month in advance.
But why was this decision taken in the first place, even as India is nowhere close to controlling the pandemic? We know two things for certain. One, given the number of cases, it's quite obvious that written exams may be next to impossible indefinitely. And two, not everyone has the privilege to access internet and technology. Assistant Professor of English at Kazi Nazrul University, Debaditya Bhattacharya says that the UGC mandate is being seen as a way to rein in the states, and he also points out that colleges and universities transitioning to the online mode with the help of edtech companies belies the institutions and the government's commitment to aid the worst affected in this pandemic.
So the UGC's revised guidelines, published almost in a tizzy on the 6th of July, contain a curious irony. Because if one returns to the original guidelines published on the 29th of April, one would realize that these guidelines were originally intended as an advisory, right? So as a set of suggestive measures, right? So which the original set of guidelines clarifies, right? So would not be binding on institutions as such, right? So it was specified in as many words that institutions, that is colleges and universities, were well within their right or their autonomy to go out and not implement these measures on the basis of the ground situation. Now, therefore, the compulsion clause that now gets attached to a set of UGC guidelines which were originally intended to be merely suggestive in nature is where the actual political game plan lies. While the political calculations behind the revised guidelines were primarily targeted at state governments, there were very significant policy ramifications to this as well. Given the spread of the pandemic, it is fairly clear that a physical conduct of examinations is next to impossible. Right, so whether it be September or October, right, so to have pen and paper examinations and to make infrastructural arrangements for them, right, so are going to be just impossible, right, which would mean that laboring under the shadow of a diktat, right, so coming directly from the central government, right, so all higher educational institutions across the country will be forced to transition their examination process online, which automatically would give a permanent entry to private edtech capital to try and determine the policy futures of public higher education in the country. And we already know of DU tying up with Amazon, several other institutions, particularly I know of institutions in West Bengal tying up with companies like TCS or edX and trying to design examination portals through which they can shift and permanently shift, right, so their examination process to online platforms, right? Now, given the constitutional commitment, right, of the public education sector, given the fact that public or state universities exist in this country, right, so precisely to make education accessible and affordable to students who are worst affected by the lockdown, right, so to transition the entire teaching or examination process online would mean that you are automatically throwing entire populations of the country outside of the purview of educational services.
So, what are the alternate suggestions? How can students be assessed without having to write these exams? Ms. Sahai points out that alternate methods were adopted for board exams, so why not for final year students?
Alternate method of evaluation based on students' own past and present performance is what we are praying, that let there be an alternative method, like which has been done by recently by IIT. For CBSE, ICSE also same pattern was being followed. So why not the same thing should be followed for final year students also? And only one semester is left. Most of the portion is completed, only one semester is left. So I guess this is the best way, best alternate method of evaluation based on students' own past and present performance.
If you like listening to this episode, please subscribe to the Big Story playlist for episodic updates. They're live on Apple, Google Podcast, Spotify, JioSaavn, and most of the other popular podcast streaming platforms. For other podcasts, please log on to the Quint website and check out the podcast section. For any feedback, shoot an email to podcasts@thequint.com.
Thanks for listening. Log on to the Quint's website and check out our other podcasts.